Well, hello, pussycats. So today we're going to talk about the Q3 2020 GitHub data. And every time I go over this GitHub data, there's definitely some projects that I want to call out for having a lot more commits relative to the stars that they have. Because to me, that indicates projects that are like really working hard but not getting as much recognition. And that's something that, as a potential investor seeking value, might be a good thing to know, right? So first up on that part of the GitHub list is Litecoin. So Litecoin has over 20,000 commits on its main GitHub repo. That's quite a few commits. Granted, Litecoin's been around a decent amount longer than a lot of the other top 25 coins, allowing it to have more time to gain commits and have developers work on it. However, even though it's been around that long and it has 20,000 commits, or almost 20,000 commits to be specific, as of the time of the data poll, it only has 3,500 stars. So that to me is kind of interesting, that there is a good amount of work being done on it, or there has been a good amount of work being done on it over the past few years, but there's not that many people going in and liking it. Another one that suffers from the same dynamic, obviously it's subjective if this is a problem or not, it's just something I think is good to make note of. But the next one is Leo, Unised Leo. So Unised Leo has over 1,700 commits, which isn't that many commits. I have a feeling Leo is maybe more of like a closely held project, less emphasis on the open source. That's my speculation. But regardless of what I'm speculating, they have over 1,700 commits. However, only 4 stars. I think of all of the top 25 that I pull, something tells me that Leo's 4 stars is probably among the lowest that they have on their repo. I'm gonna put my glasses on so we can keep going. Okay. Ooh, that's better. Hopefully they're clean. My glasses are always dirty. Okay, so Unised Leo only has 4 stars on its repo. That's not a good sign. So that means within the developer community, bottom line is there's not a lot of developers that are going in and saying, hey, thumbs up, we like Unised Leo. Next up, which is a little more controversial, but I'm just going to state some facts to start out with, is Bitcoin SV. Because Bitcoin SV has at the time of this data poll, 16,542, so I fix my hair, 542 commits on its GitHub repo. That's a lot. So over 16,000 commits on its GitHub repo. Yet it only has 409 stars. And this doesn't surprise me because Craig Wright is such like a bastard child within the cryptocurrency community. Like, he's a highly controversial figure for a lot of reasons, and I respect a lot of those reasons. But again, just stating facts, the fact that Bitcoin SV has over 16,000 commits, which relatively speaking is a lot of commits, a lot of developer activity, which is usually a good thing. Yet it only has 409 stars. I mean, just to put it into like a relative perspective with its biggest competitor, which is Bitcoin Cash, I mean, if there were any two to have to duke it out over and over again, it would be Bitcoin SV and its philosophy and direction versus Bitcoin Cash and its philosophy and direction, because SV is what forked off of Bitcoin Cash, if I remember correctly. But anyways, Bitcoin Cash and its developer community, guess how many commits they have? So remember, SV has over 16,000 commits on its GitHub repo, its main GitHub repository. However, Bitcoin Cash only has a little over 1,100. So Bitcoin Cash has, over 15,000 fewer commits than Bitcoin SV does, but SV is obviously still not getting much love for a variety of other reasons. At least they're developing on it. It's not, I can say based on this information that you can't accuse Craig Wright of building a castle in the air. It's not just some marketing scheme. There really are people developing on SV. Okay, so that's that section. Again, those are the projects that have way more commits relative to stars. Might want to look into that discrepancy and see if you find some value in that. Now, here is something that I haven't keyed in on until this data pull, and that is the projects that on their GitHub repo haven't had much activity on them. Because something I didn't key in on as much before is like, there's some projects out here that their last commit was over a year ago, which to me is potentially very concerning. So I took a little glance at that, made some notes. I didn't post this as part of the data pull on the website necessarily. This is just like a little video highlight reel extra bit of info that I think could be helpful. So Hedge Trade is one of those. Hedge Trade, their last commit on their GitHub repo, their main repo, was over a year ago. So that's concerning if there's not, I mean, even if they have a good amount of commits, any particular project, even if they have a good amount of commits, if their last commit wasn't for months, if not over a year ago, that should be pretty concerning because there's not a lot of recent development happening is what that tells me. Ethereum Classic, their most recent, the GitHub repo I've been following, their most recent commit was 16 months ago, so over a year ago. Yet Ethereum's most recent commit as of the time of this data pull was 9 hours ago. So Ethereum Classic, based on, again, the repo I've been following, it's been over a year since they had a commit on their repository. Maybe there's another repository somewhere else for Ethereum Classic that I don't know about, but if this one hasn't had any action, any developer action for over 16 months, like that should be very concerning as far as Ethereum Classic goes. And so next up on the video is kind of similar to the first section we talked about, but it's the opposite. So this section is all about the projects that are getting lots and lots of stars and likes, and like people are going in and saying, hey, you're awesome. Yet there's not a lot of developer activity, like actual commits to help back up the high amount of stars. And these are the same names on the list that show up quarter after quarter after quarter and constantly have this dynamic, which to me is concerning because if as an investor, I'm not going to like a project that just has a lot of hype, a lot of likes, but not a lot of actual like gritty development activity happening. That being said, Binance is one of them. Binance still has way more stars. So as of this data pull, it has like about 3,000 stars relative to its number of commits, which is like 221. So 221 commits, not a lot going on, yet over 3,000 stars. It's a huge discrepancy there. That being said, I kind of wonder if Binance is, again, less emphasis on open source, less emphasis on GitHub, which you could make pro and con arguments for in and of itself, and maybe that's why they don't have as many commits. But bottom line is like the Neo community, or not this Neo, the Binance community is very strong in terms of like hype. But how much do they have to back it up? That's the ultimate question. It's one thing to have hype, but you gotta have the grit too. Neo is also in a kind of similar boat. Neo also has a decent number of stars, like around 3,000 stars in its code repository, yet there's only about 1,000 commits in Neo's name. And the last commit was at least done relatively recently. So I will give Neo props for, you know, they're still actively working on their code repository, even if there's just not that many commits total. So, something that I thought was kind of interesting to know is Polkadot, even though it's like fresh into the mix, and Polkadot's only been, you know, out for a couple months, its main repository, the Polkadot main repository, code repository, already has more commits than projects that have been around a while. For instance, Polkadot already has more commits than Hedge Trade, Huobi, USDC, Maker, Cosmos, and Binance. So that's a lot. Like Hedge Trade, Huobi, USDC, Maker, Cosmos, Binance, they've all been around a decent amount longer than Polkadot in terms of being on the market. Yet Polkadot already has more commits and more developer activity. So good job, Polkadot. Ethereum Classic, kind of like what I would have alluded to before, is the only project that didn't have any improvement over last quarter. Like at least some of the projects were adding some commits and adding some stars, at least making some gains on their total activity points that I track. But Ethereum Classic was the only code repository that didn't have any gains at all, like 0% improvement. that's not good. But Ethereum Classic is finally also being kicked off of the top 25 market cap. So there's finally some integrity happening there. Let's see. Other projects that have less than 1% gains in their total activity points. So basically are projects that made the fewest gains outside of Ethereum Classic. So less than 1% improvement from Q2 were EOS, Litecoin, Cardano, Dash, Ripple, and IOTA. So again, that's EO, Litecoin, Cardano, Dash, Ripple, and IOTA made fewer than 1% gains on their repositories that I tracked. And the biggest percentage gains, the one that's made the most gains since Q2 of 2020, are Bitcoin Cash, actually, Crypto.com coin, Huobi, Chainlink, and Tezos. So good job to Bitcoin Cash, Crypto.com coin, Huobi, Chainlink, and Tezos. They're doing the best. And that wraps up the GitHub data. Hope this was helpful. And I will see you for the Twitter and Reddit data to go over some of like the marketing and community strengths and weaknesses of some of the top 25 market cap coins.